You'd think a life-altering moment would happen in a cathedral or during a sunset. But mine happened in room 204 of the county clerk's office, under flickering fluorescent lights that smelled like stale coffee and industrial cleaner. I'm 34. At this age, you don't just fall in love with a face. You fall in love with a future. I thought Elena was that future. We were standing there, just days away from the big day, filling out the marriage license. It felt like a formality, a victory lap. Then the clerk, a woman who looked like she'd seen 1,000 happy couples and believed in none of them, looked up from her computer. Name change? She asked, her finger hovering over the keyboard. I smiled, looking at Elena. I expected her to say Moretti. I expected us to finally be a team. I'm staying as Elena Holloway, she said. Her voice was flat, practiced, like she was ordering a latte at a high-end bistro. I felt a slight twitch in my chest. Holloway, I whispered. Elena, that's your ex-husband's name. We talked about this. I thought you were taking mine. She didn't even look at me. She just adjusted her designer bag and looked at the clerk. Moretti is just. It's so heavy, Kevin. It sounds like a dusty grocery store in Little Italy. Holloway has a ring to it. It's established. In my industry, names are currency. People hear Holloway, and they think country clubs and Ivy League. They hear Moretti, and they expect a delivery of sourdough and olive oil. She said it with a smile, like she was doing me a favor by being honest in that moment. The woman I loved looked like a stranger performing a cost-benefit analysis on my soul. My grandfather came through Ellis Island with nothing but that clunky name and a dream. And here she was, treating it like a social handicap she refused to carry. The drive home was silent, but my head was screaming. You know that feeling when you realize you've been reading a book for a year only to find out the last chapter was missing? That was me. I looked at Elena's profile as she scrolled through her phone, probably checking the likes on her latest bride-to-be post. She wasn't just keeping a name. She was keeping a ghost. She was choosing to carry the identity of a man she claimed to have moved on from a man who cheated on her. No less simply because his family came over on the Mayflower instead of a steerage deck in 1912. It hit me like a physical blow. To her, I was an upgrade in character, but a downgrade in branding. I thought about my father. I thought about the grease under his fingernails from 30 years at the shipyard, and how proud he was when he saw Moretti printed on my college diploma. He thought he had built a bridge for me. But Elena, she saw that bridge as a back alley she didn't want to be caught in. She didn't want me. She wanted a curated version of me. She wanted the 34-year-old successful architect with the stable income. But she wanted to prune the parts that didn't fit her Greenwich Village aesthetic. She was treating my heritage like a bad haircut that she could just style out of existence. I realized then that if she was ashamed of the name on my mailbox, she was eventually going to be ashamed of the man standing behind it. She was clinging to Holloway because it was a golden ticket to a world that would never truly accept a Moretti. And the worst part, she expected me to be okay with being her dirty little secret while she lived in a dead man's shadow. I didn't blow up. I didn't scream or demand we leave. I think that's what scared me the most, the sudden, icy clarity that washed over me. When the clerk pushed the papers toward me, I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. I signed my name Kevin Anthony Moretti one last time on a document that linked me to her. But as the ink dried, I knew. I wasn't signing a marriage license. I was signing a death certificate for us. Elena reached over, squeezed my hand, and gave me this patronizing little pat. Thanks for being so understanding, babe, she whispered. It's just for the best. You see, I just nodded. I played the part. I walked her to the car, opened the door, and drove us back to our high-rise apartment in the city. But I wasn't really there. I was looking at the life we'd built: the $4,000 Italian leather sofa, the curated bookshelves, the espresso machine that cost more than my first car, and I saw it for what it was. A stage set, that night, while she slept soundly next to me, dreaming of a Holloway wedding. I sat out on the balcony watching the Hudson River. I realized that a marriage isn't just a contract between two people. It's a merger of two histories. If she viewed my history as a social liability, a stain she had to bleach out of her perfect life, then what were we even doing? I looked at my reflection in the glass. I am 34 years old. I am too old to play pretend, and I'm way too proud to be someone's compromise. I realized I couldn't stand at that altar and promise to protect a woman who didn't even respect the name of the man who raised me. The decision wasn't even a choice anymore. It was an obligation to my own blood. The opportunity came 3 days later. Elena had a champagne brunch bridal shower with her circle in the Hamptons, the kind of event where people talk about property values and legacy while sipping mimosas. She kissed me goodbye, smelling like expensive perfume and ambition, and told me she'd be back by dinner. The moment her Uber pulled away, I didn't feel sad. I felt like an architect looking at a condemned building. It was time for a controlled demolition. I started with the dress. It was a $10,000 for a one masterpiece sitting in a garment bag in our guest room. I knew the boutique owner, Sarah. We'd done some design work for her shop. I called her directly. "It's off, Sarah, and it hasn't been touched for final alterations yet." There was a long pause on the other end, but money talks. She agreed to take it back with a 20% restocking fee. I didn't care about the $2,000. I just wanted the white ghost out of my house. Next was the venue. A $15,000 deposit was sitting with a vineyard in Napa. I called the events manager. "Cancellation," I said. I didn't offer an explanation. I didn't need one. The caterer, the florist, the $5,000 jazz ensemble, one by one. I got the lines. My phone started vibrating in my pocket like a heartbeat. Ping. Refund initiated. Ping. Cancellation confirmed. Ping. Credit back to account. Every notification felt like oxygen returning to my lungs. It's funny how we're taught that building things is the goal of life. But that afternoon, nothing felt as good as tearing it all down. I was watching $40,000 of Holloway branded perfection evaporate back into my bank account. By 3 p.m. The wedding was dead on paper. I stood in the middle of our living room, looking at the empty space where her dress had been. For the first time in months, the air didn't feel heavy. I wasn't Kevin, the social liability. I was just Kevin Moretti, and I was finally back in control of the blueprints. The guest room felt haunted after I took the dress back to the boutique. The empty brass hook on the closet door looked like a question mark. I decided to give it an answer. I went into the attic and found an old wooden trunk, the one my grandfather brought over from the old country. Inside, tucked between yellowing newspapers and old recipes, was a small, hand-stitched Italian flag. It wasn't a souvenir from a gift shop. It was the one he waved at the pier when my father graduated from trade school. It represented every sacrifice, every clunky syllable of our name, and every ounce of dignity we owned. I hung that flag on the empty dress hook. The green, white, and red looked defiant against the sterile, eggshell white paint of our modern apartment. Then, I sat at her vanity, the one I bought her for her birthday, and took a piece of her expensive, heavy stock stationery. I didn't write a manifesto. I didn't pour my heart out. I kept it as surgical as she had been at the clerk's office. I wrote, "Elena, you told me the name Moretti was too heavy for you to carry. I've spent the afternoon making sure you don't have to carry it at all. The dress is gone. The vineyard is cancelled. Our future has been refunded. Since you're so fond of the Holloway name and the lifestyle that comes with it, maybe your ex-husband can foot the bill for your next wedding. I am moving on with a name I am actually proud of." I placed the note right under the flag. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt a strange, cold peace. For months, I had been trying to fit my life into her narrow, polished world. But looking at that flag, I realized I didn't belong in a world that required me to erase my father just to get through the door of a country club. I packed my last suitcase, took my passport from the drawer, and didn't look back. I wasn't just leaving an apartment. I was resigning from a life that required me to be ashamed of who I am. I was standing by the door, my coat on and my bag zipped, when I heard the key turn in the lock. Elena walked in, laughing at something on her phone. Draped in shopping bags from a spree, I am sure she expected me to pay for later. She looked like the perfect picture of a Manhattan socialite. Then she saw the suitcases. Then she saw me. "Kevin, what is this? Are we going somewhere?" she asked, her smile faltering but not yet gone. "I am," I said. "The note is in the guest room." She hurried past me. I stayed by the door, listening. I heard the silence as she read it, and then the sharp, ragged intake of breath. When she came back out, her face wasn't sad. It was flushed with a terrifying, cold rage. The sophisticated Elena was gone. In her place was someone I didn't recognize. "Are you serious?" she hissed, waving the note. "You cancelled the vineyard? You returned my wank over a name? Kevin, this is pathologically dramatic. Even for an Italian, it's not just a name, Elena. It's my father. It's me. Oh, please." She rolled her eyes, throwing the note onto the marble countertop. "You are being incredibly sensitive." I was being pragmatic. We live in a world of optics. And you're acting like I insulted your honor in a 1940 seconds movie. It's a branding choice, Kevin. Everyone in my circle understands that. You're throwing away a 3-year relationship because your ego is too fragile to handle a little social climbing? That was it. The true colors were bright and blinding. To her, our relationship was a ladder, and my heritage was just an awkward step she wanted to skip. She didn't see a man standing in front of her. She saw a brand that was failing to cooperate with her marketing strategy. It's not about ego, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that cut through her shouting. It's about the fact that you're more in love with the ghost of your ex-husband's social status than you are with the man standing in your living room. If I'm too clunky for your future, then you're too hollow for mine. I didn't wait for her to find another insult. I picked up my bags and walked out. The sound of her screaming that I was ruining her life followed me all the way to the elevator. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally heading home. I hadn't even reached my brother's place in Jersey before my phone started blowing up. Elena had gone nuclear. She'd posted a teary-eyed selfie on her Instagram stories, black and white, high contrast, the works. The caption read, "Heartbroken. To be blindsided and abandoned days before the wedding. I never knew someone could be so cruel. Dealing with the fallout of a cancelled dream." She was good. She didn't mention the name change. She just painted me as the unstable fiancé who vanished into the night. Her comments section turned into a bonfire. People who had sat at our dinner table were calling me a coward and a narcissist. But here's the thing about optics. They only work if everyone stays on script. The cracks started appearing when one of the bridesmaids, someone who had actually been at the clerk's office with us to help with the aesthetic of the day, decided she'd had enough of the hypocrisy. She commented, very publicly, "Are we going to talk about why he left? Or are we going to pretend you didn't tell him his family name was too low class for your brand while you clung to your ex's surname?" The internet loves a villain, but it loves a hypocrite even more. Within 2 hours, the narrative flipped. Someone leaked a screenshot of a group chat where Elena had joked that Moretti sounded like a brand of frozen pizza. The Holloway prestige she fought so hard to protect became her cage. People started calling her out for the subtle and not so subtle elitism. Her Hampton circle suddenly didn't want to be associated with someone accused of heritage shaming. She tried to delete the comments, then she tried to go private, but it was too late. The sophisticated brand she had built was melting. It turns out that in the real world, people might like a fancy name, but they hate a person who thinks they're too good for the people who love them. I watched my follower count drop as I blocked her, but I didn't care. I wasn't a character in her story anymore. I was a man who had his dignity back. 2 days after the digital fallout, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't expect to see. Arthur Holloway. Elena's father, Arthur, was the quintessential self-made American. He lived in a sprawling estate in Connecticut, spoke with a perfectly neutral mid-Atlantic accent, and moved through the world with the quiet confidence of a man who owned everything he looked at. I expected him to scream at me. I expected a lecture on honor and duty. "Kevin," he said, his voice sounding older than I remembered. I heard what happened. I heard about the name. I braced myself. "Arthur, I'm sorry it went down like this, but I couldn't stop," he interrupted. He was silent for a long time. I could hear the flick of a lighter on the other end. "I want to tell you something I've never told my daughter. My name isn't Holloway." Not really. I sat down on the edge of my bed. "What? 40 years ago, I was Arturo Holgu N," he whispered. I was young, hungry, and terrified that my name was a wall I'd never climb over. So, I changed it. I buried Arturo under Arthur and traded my history for a sophisticated English surname. I thought it would make me powerful. He took a long drag of his cigar. And it worked. I got the board seats. I got the country club memberships. But every time I sign a contract, every time I see Holloway on a piece of mail, I feel like a man wearing a costume that's too tight. I raised Elena in that costume. I taught her without meaning to that the label matters more than the wine. And for that, I am deeply sorry. I didn't know what to say. The man I thought was the peak of the social hierarchy was confessing to a lifetime of identity theft. "You did the right thing, Kevin," Arthur said, his voice firming up. "You stood up for the man who raised you. Don't ever let someone, even my own daughter, make you feel small for where you came from. A man who is ashamed of his father's name will eventually become a man who is ashamed of himself. Keep the name, kid. It's worth more than the vineyard ever was." When he hung up, I felt a strange shift in the air. I wasn't just the guy who got dumped or the guy who cancelled the wedding. I was the guy who had saved himself from a 40-year masquerade. The bank account was full of wedding ghost money, nearly $40,000 of refunds and clawed-back deposits. Elena's dream had become my ticket to reality. Instead of a weekend in Napa surrounded by people who would mispronounce my name over $200 bottles of Cabernet, I booked a first-class ticket to Florence. I didn't pack a tuxedo. I packed a pair of sturdy boots and the small Italian flag I'd taken back from the closet. 2 days later, I was standing in a small village outside of Lucca, the place my grandfather left when he was 19. In New York, Moretti was a brand to be managed or a liability to be pruned. But here, it was etched into the stone of the fountain. It was painted on the side of the local butcher shop. It was shouted across the piazza by an old man calling for his grandson. I spent my days walking the cobblestones, breathing in the scent of wild rosemary and wood smoke. For the first time in 34 years, I didn't feel like I was trying to be someone. I wasn't the architect trying to look Ivy League for Elena's friends. I wasn't the fiancé apologizing for his clunky heritage. I remember sitting at a small cafe, watching the sunset turn the Tuscan hills into a painting of gold and violet. I looked at my passport sitting on the table. Kevin Moretti. In the States, I had spent so much energy trying to be enough for a woman who lived on the surface of things. I realized then that I hadn't lost a wife. I had avoided a life sentence. I had been prepared to marry a woman who wanted to fix me like a fixer-upper apartment. If I had walked down that aisle, I would have spent the next 40 years slowly disappearing, piece by piece, until there was nothing left of the man my father raised. Standing in that square, I didn't feel lonely. I felt solid. I realized that my name wasn't a weight, it was an anchor. And for the first time, I was grateful that the storm had hit before I'd left the harbor. I've been back in the States for 6 months now. Life didn't go back to normal, it got better. I moved out of that sterile high-rise and bought a brownstone that needs a little work. But it's got good bones. Just like me. I heard through the grapevine and the occasional unavoidable social media post that Elena is still Holloway. She eventually went back and bought that very white dress when the boutique put it on the clearance rack, thinking she'd find a way to use it. Now, it just sits in her closet, wrapped in plastic, a $10,000 monument to a future that never had a foundation. She's still chasing the right circles, still looking for a man whose name sounds like a law firm, but the buzz around her has gone cold. People remember the Moretti incident, and in a world built on optics, being exposed as a snob is a hard brand to pivot from. As for me, I'm seeing someone new. Her name is Sarah. She's an artist who looks at my sketches and actually wants to hear the stories about the bakery in New Jersey and the stone fountains in Lucca. The first time I introduced myself to her family, I said Kevin Moretti with a smile I didn't have to force. She didn't ask about the branding, she just said, "That's a beautiful name. What does it mean?" I realized then that Moretti isn't just a label on a mailbox. It's a 100-year-old promise. It's the sound of my grandfather's laughter and the grit in my father's hands. It's a name that survived wars, oceans, and poverty. It was never too heavy for me to carry. It was simply too heavy for someone as light as Elena to hold. I'm 34, and I finally understand that the most important architecture I'll ever design isn't a building, it's the legacy I leave behind. I'm proud to carry this name, and I am perfectly fine carrying it alone until I find someone who doesn't just tolerate it, but is honored to add it to her own. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. What do you think about this story? Let me know in the comments.